Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today I want to welcome award-winning international filmmaker, visual artist, director, and composer, Frank Jacob. Today we're going to discuss the hidden world behind ours and how he has explored many aspects of this through his films, from the secret space program to consciousness and energy. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Nice to be here. How are you?
I'm good, very good. And thanks for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate that. I thought we would start with a bit more about your background and then what opened your eyes to, things aren't how we're told in the history books and by television and media, and it opened your eyes to the hidden world behind ours.
I think it started for me actually very early in my life. When I was about 12, I started reading books about things like Hiroshima, and I was sort of surprised that it kind of shocked me, a young forming mind, learning about how these kinds of events, violent actions are possible in our society, and it made me sort of become very skeptical and questioning of authority and what's going on around us. And I think it steered me in a direction to begin sort of asking a lot of questions. And as I progressed, I started to get introduced to consciousness books, things that were dealing with altered states of consciousness that lead to perception of finer aspects of reality that most people don't really perceive. They usually categorize them in things like extrasensory perception. This was at a time when there wasn't really a lot of the new age stuff that we have around us now going on yet. It was still things like Jane Roberts or the Carlos Castaneda books. They were kind of pretty hot for a while in those days. But they basically opened me up to the idea that there was sort of a solid 3D reality around us, but at the same time there seemed to be this finer element that was not necessarily visible unless you got yourself into a state of, just a finer state of perception. And those two kind of things, those two aspects of my world really kind of formed me and shaped the way I pursued everything into my adult life.
So what brought you to making your films? I think you started out with music, is that correct?
Right. I started off as music, and I figured that music, the arts were I didn't really want to go the conventional route, much to the disappointment probably of my parents. And I decided not to go the university route and the standard official educational route, because as I said earlier, I was kind of skeptical of all that. And I wasn't even really, I'd read somewhere, I think that at that point, by the time you graduate university, everything you learned is already obsolete. And I think we all know that that's the case by now. So I decided that I thought the best way to get out there and to kind of learn and share and put messages and help awaken others is to use the arts. And that's why the arts are very attractive to me. And of course, a natural form of art for me at the time was music, because it was something that I was doing. I was playing instruments, so I'd formed bands. I was really interested in the technology aspect of it as well, so the recording of music and the composing of music. And that led me to sound design, actually. And sound design is related to music in the sense that it's the symphony behind the silent film. When you're working on films and you're in post-production, you start off with a blank slate. You've just got some images and some scenes that were shot, and usually not a heck of a lot of sound. So you end up assembling 90% of the sound that people hear in movies, artificial or created or just enhanced from the natural recordings that were done. So it was fascinating to kind of get involved in that world. And then once I was involved in that whole post-production sound part of it, of course, the idea of film for me, which was something I pursued in high school, but there was really no chance of getting into any kind of film school in the area that I was living in. So so yeah, here I was now doing post-production film, and then the film technology and the video technology and the digital age was kind of budding. So it was now more or less accessible for someone to actually grab a digital camera and make films, and that's really what I wanted to do. I felt the king's discipline was to take sound, video, ideas, and combine it all and put messages out there.
Very good. And through your experience, do you find that those in control, those that run the planet, have malevolent agendas, possibly to control, enslave? I mean, we're seeing so much censorship here now in the United States. I mean, just a huge rash of it lately, taking down anything having to do with what they label as conspiracy. The agenda seems to just be growing worse each year. And I believe it goes back even to ancient times with the level of control that they're using. It could be ancient magic or something that they've been taught through the ages, through mystery schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the manipulation that's going on in society is just on a level it's actually stunning, because you would think that now in this day and age, you know, we would have reached a state where with the internet and the sharing of ideas, that it was really no longer possible to to really manipulate people and keep them manipulated on the level that they're doing. But in fact, instead of really opening up the world, for sharing and widespread, just exploding of old myths and ideologies and bringing us really into a new age. You're right. It's absolutely shocking to be seeing how far it's really gotten, how bad it's gotten. I mean, I guess, it's funny, from over here in Europe, looking at the United States, you realize just, I'm in Germany. So, I mean, Germany is a prime example of a country that after the Second World War was completely pulled and called back to an ideology that was very simplistic and very base. Like, this is all you're allowed to do, and you have to shape your minds around these limited ideas. And you think, and then looking at it now, you're going, okay, well, that was a lot of manipulation going on there. But and you think that only the Germans are victim of it, but actually the whole world, and especially the United States, because the United States were the so-called victors of the Second World War, or amongst them. And you would think that that the true story of what happened in the Second World War would be out in the country of the free. And in fact, it's actually quite the opposite. What I'm seeing is that having studied a little bit more into the background of the history of this part of the world, you realize that the story that you in America have gotten has been completely manipulated so deeply that you've formed entire cults of belief around it. And so people that are often fighting for rights and fighting for justice, or even putting out ideas about the secret space program, things like that, their ideas are tainted by their picture of history right off the bat. So every now and then you see these you're reading it and you're going, oh, wow, that's cool, about, this information about such and such and technology was developed. And then they make some statement about the Second World War that now has been since debunked, and they base a large part of their information on it. And you realize, okay, well, look, it's all been manipulated. I mean, it's just so far. I mean, there's a statement by William Casey, who was the CIA director in 1981, that says, we'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the public believes is false. Now, that was in 1981. I mean, here we are, like almost 40 years later. And I have to say, they've been very, very successful. And it's kind of scary, because they've led people to believe that they're free, and they've led them to believe that the ideas they're pursuing are on the fringe, and they're breaking out the truth, and they're just around the corner from disclosure. But if you look at it a little closer, you realize that it's a very, very tight leash on all of it, and that the key figures and players involved in that disclosure and getting this information out themselves are slippery characters, and they're really not putting the whole truth out there. They're just putting little nuggets of it out there, and then nobody, it's almost like they're dropping it out there in little bits just to kind of conditioning people to some greater agenda that they might have. So they, I mean, that what you started off saying is like, is there this evil cabal or whatever? There's this group of people that are manipulating society. I'm trying to get behind that myself, and I fluctuate. There are times where I think absolutely there's this evil group of people. On the other hand, I still think sometimes it might actually just be the human, the programming of human, consciousness going back 100,000 years that led us to go through an ice age where we had to pull together into clans to survive. And those people who came out and said crazy things or were a challenge to the clan would be cast out and would almost be certain death. So there's this programming in our minds at a cellular level, not going very far back, maybe, 2,000 generations, that actually still is deeply impregnated in our cellular memory, that we are afraid to accept and embrace these new ideas because it challenges the society, this comfort zone that we've all built around us to be living in, because we're afraid that if we lose that comfort zone, that we'll go back into chaos. And I think maybe both, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe there's a bit of both. I mean, you can go back to Enlil and Enki if you want to go back to, early, this is where it's kind of all leading. It doesn't really, you can't really say that the forces that were driving the Second World War are individual characters. You actually, if you look at it closely, see a group of people, and if you put names on those people, you can see those people are connected to organizations, and those organizations have been going back for hundreds of years, and they've actually had some kind of an agenda and a plan, and every now and then they leak out little bits of their plan, and it's put out there as fiction or some crazy idea so that we see. So it's almost like they disclose it to us, but since nobody really took it seriously, they're just, you can look up at Wikipedia. It's a pretty good yard measuring stick of where the sanity line is. You'll read something about the protocols of the wise men of Zion or something, and you go on Wikipedia. Oh yeah, that was some fictional thing that was written, blah, blah, blah. But if you read it, it's pretty shocking, because everything that's written in it has happened. It's come to pass. And so is there really a group out there? I mean, I think there's a lot of evidence for both. And maybe that group is playing on this idea of the cellular memory and the fear in us, because the fear is kind of what keeps us from being brave enough to challenge that status quo.
And I agree with you. It may also be just different factions that have different agendas, and, they may be infighting amongst them, trying to get across their own agendas. And it's funny you mentioned World War II, because I see a lot of the so-called evil that we were fighting against, we actually brought back through Project Paperclip and integrated through our own country in many ways. And I believe it birthed the secret space program.
Well, that's sort of the going theory right now. I think that there's some of it is true, and some of it's a little bit it's a little bit contrived, because what happened over here, it's really interesting, because if you look back at that time, what was going on here was really an effort, because after the First World War, Germany was in a condition of basically they were on their knees. I mean, the German people were on the edge, you could almost say, of extinction. Their culture, their values. I mean, the thing was, the Treaty of Versailles basically wrecked the country. And it was quickly descending into absolute chaos. And so it was like something needed to be done to save that aspect of humanity, really. And it was actually done. And the ideologies that were coming out were based on things that were very sound, like against the central banking system, against interest, and countries and governments that essentially put control mechanisms on the population. And they were actually creating a society that was open and free and supported in a way by government. And then within 4 years, the country went from being on its knees and finished to being the most culturally advanced, scientifically advanced, the most well-ordered society in the entire planet. I mean, you got to ask yourself, that's a miracle, right? And then along comes this war, right? And we're told that it was all because there was this crazy dictator, but the forces that brought that war and wiped out, again, Germany for the second time, are still in place. So you're asking yourself, you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, like, if we vanquished that evil and that whole nasty part of society, then why is the ideology that came in that they were supposedly telling us they were fighting even more powerful now than it ever has been? And that's the one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, yes, there was a very highly advanced secret technology being developed here. But a lot of the information coming out about just how far developed that program was tends to get exaggerated. And mainly the reason it gets exaggerated is because the people that are putting the information together do not speak German or read German or understand the German culture or really know anybody directly that was here when all that stuff was going down. And as a result, and then, with the leaking out of stuff that comes out on the internet, there's all kinds of weird stuff that comes out and theories about these huge fleets, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a group of people, a lot of people, researchers over here that will tell you that's extremely blown out. That's like extremely blown out of proportion. At best, they had developed 3 or 4 prototypes, and they had only really just barely got the program off the ground before the country was brought to its knees. And I tend to believe these researchers because I speak German and I'm reading some interesting material which is written by the people that were actually there. And so it's like when the Americans came into Germany, which is something a lot of you don't know, they basically went into the archives of the German the German patents. There were thousands, millions of patents of really highly advanced technology over here, and the Americans took it. They didn't say, okay, we're going to take this, thanks a lot, here's some money for it, we'll take it, it's worth trillions. No, they just robbed them. They just took it over to America. But the problem was they didn't understand it. They didn't understand how to read the stuff. They didn't have the scientists that were able and capable to really be able to decipher this information and make anything out of it. So Project Paperclip, for the largest part, was bringing those German scientists over to decipher these patents and all of the stuff that they'd taken from Germany, and maybe figure out a way to develop an advanced technology to rival what was going on, because there was another faction of Germans that were working on secret programs. But that wasn't the stuff that was necessarily on the books. And this, you could say, there seems to be evidence that this was the early form of a breakaway society that began at that point, where they basically said, okay, these people are nuts. They're going to destroy the entire country. We have to save something. Let's go. Now, whether they went to Antarctica, there's a lot of evidence, or a lot of theories about, the Byrd, Admiral Byrd, and them going down to Antarctica and creating a sort of a Shangri-La for the high-level Nazis and bringing thousands of them over there. Or, there's also evidence that they went to South America, to Argentina, and to those areas where there's still roots of that over there. In fact, I think it's very credible that they went there rather than Antarctica. Or another option is they paneled between those two places because of the proximity. Did they discover something in Antarctica? I absolutely do believe they did. And the problem, though, that a lot of people don't always realize is that you cannot live in the Antarctica for longer than 6 to 9 months. You know why? Because your immune system begins to disintegrate, because there are no bacteria there. It's like a sterile, freeze-dried continent. And we're used to being around germs and bacteria and whatever is around us in society. And you go to Antarctica for 6 months and your body begins to lose the ability to defend itself. So you could literally sentence yourself to death by going to Antarctica. So the theories that are put out there by certain authors and people out there now that they've been down there for years or decades and living there, I think it's bunk. I don't know. I don't believe it. I think that there's a middle there somewhere. There's a half-truth there somewhere. And so, the other thing that they talk about then is that this aspect of the breakaway Germans, the evil Germans, whatever, then attacked Byrd's fleet, wiped it out, and then approached the Eisenhower administration and said, okay, you guys are going to capitulate or we're going to destroy you. And they became the Dark Fleet or the Dark Force. But I still think, personally, being over here and reading the German, that I think that sounds like a romantic science fiction story with a lot of little bits of truth in it, but a lot of it is just missing giant gaping holes. If you look at true history, you always have to look at both sides. There's the official story that's going on, what we know, what they've documented. And then there's this secret world, which is very murky, and you can only piece it together by little chunks of puzzles that you find. And you have to be very, very careful, because you could easily take a little piece of that puzzle and say, oh, here's that evidence I need to prove this theory I have. And because nobody else has any other puzzle pieces to contradict yours, you can put together pretty much any theory that you want, but it may not be true. So we have to be very, and so, this is going right into what you're saying earlier about manipulation and the internet and stuff. I mean, it's easy to let yourself get manipulated even in the area of the secret space program and the secret technology and the space fleet and all this stuff, because that is just filled with a lot of disinformation also.
I agree. And yeah, like you said, they have to have some kind of middle ground. Some of these whistleblowers that are coming out lately, it's just so out there that it's pretty unbelievable stuff, to say the least. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about American movies, media, TV, and music. But I want to start with music, because I love rock and roll. That's what I grew up on. And nowadays, I can't find any good rock music. I see a decline in the quality of American music. I don't know how it is over on your side there, but I'd just like to get your take on what's going on.
Well, that's an interesting question. It's really funny, because just recently I was again reminded of some of the really dark, I don't know if you want to call it whatever, satanic or Luciferian. I tend to stay away from those kinds of words, because they're so, they've also been manipulated. I think but there's a lot of symbology in the music that points back to Illuminati and secret societies. And if you look and taking a bit of time and looking at some of the stuff that's coming out of the American music pop scene right now, you have to, unless you're really blind, I mean, you can see this symbology in all of these videos, to the point where there's videos that show, people that are being subjected to MK Ultra mind control programming right there on the screen. MK, I'm sure you're familiar with MK Ultra. And we have in Packing for Mars, we have Duncan O'Finian in the film, and he was part of that program, and he talks a lot about what he went through in his particular program. But it was a very wide, diverse program and platform to work on one thing, and that was basically mind control. And it seems like the music industry went from being this thing where it was based on rebellion. It was like against the system. We're going to grow our hair, we're going to say our messages, we're going to tour around and talk directly to the people. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than going directly to the public. It's like you got 20,000 people in the audience, and you're putting out messages that are powerful. I mean, look at some of the musicians in the past that came out that had powerful messages. Bob Marley, John Lennon. What happened to these people, right? It's like gone, and in the most, in the most horrible way. It's the assassination or cancer or whatever. So it's like the people in the music business that were very powerful early on in the 60s and 70s began to thin out and vanish. And gradually it was taken over by, I think the big complaint in the 70s and 80s was that it was being commercialized, that it was all about selling out, that you'd start seeing Robert Plant selling Miller beer, and you'd be going, all right, that's it. When Robert Plant is selling Miller beer, it's over, and that was in the 80s. That was like still when it was fairly mild, right? But now you've got like these huge Super Bowl performances, and you've got these musicians out there, actually practicing ritual magic right there on the stage in front of hundreds, millions of people watching it, and those people are totally ignorant about what they're seeing. They're just letting it go in. It's like going in, and it's going in, and it's attaching itself to their psyches and to their consciousnesses. And if you're not aware of what you're watching, then you're going to it's going to attach itself to you. It's like not necessarily to manipulate you, But it's like if you're ignorant of it and if you're blind to it and it's attached itself to you, you become kind of a bit of a mental zombie and you're giving your energy away. And where is this energy going? Well, this energy is going into a field. And that is what these people are, I think, doing it for. It's like they're vampires of some kind of energy, and they're using the symbology in modern pop music. And I don't think you're the only ones. I think it's happening in England, and it's starting to happen in Germany as well, because the Germans, and they're just emulating the wannabe pop scene, which starts in America. So it's like it's bleeding out into the rest of the world. So this energy attachment thing is going on, and it's actually really kind of sick. But the only way you can protect yourself from it is really to learn what's going on, to identify, like, start to learn about these symbols and what they mean and where they come from. And then it actually becomes kind of fun, because you can identify them when you're watching the videos. And once you're identifying them and you're seeing what's going on, you're totally immune to it. And you see through it. And for the most part, you probably won't even want to watch that music because it's boring as hell anyway. I mean, I have a video on my Facebook wall, a film that I started in 2003 when I first came to Germany, of a German band called Grobschnitt. They were the perfect example, kind of like a Grateful Dead of Germany. They toured over 1,200 concerts in their life. I mean, they play like 70, 80 concerts a year. I mean, these guys were amazing. And I started making a documentary film. I never completed it, but I put the unfinished thing up. And it's funny you mentioned music, because just the other day I got this extreme message. I needed to put it out even if it wasn't finished. And these guys represented that old spirit of when music still was true to being rebellion. And you actually had to sit there and learn your instrument, Chris, right? You had to learn how to play the drums and learn how to play your guitar and sit there with a group of guys. This is before all the sequencers and computers and all that. So you'd have to actually practice.
That's part of why I love it so much, is because I do play instruments too.
Oh, great. Yeah, well, then because there's nothing more rewarding than learning how to play an instrument, tuning into those frequencies. People ask you, like, how do you come up with songs? Like, where do you compose them? Well, when you learn an instrument, it just comes. It comes out of the field, because you're tuning in the instrument. The instrument is playing the vibrations and frequencies, and those frequencies attract messages and attract chord structures and rhythms, and suddenly a song. I haven't composed very much lately, but when I was actively composing, I used to always feel kind of unsure about whether I was ever going to compose another piece of music, because I felt it was out of my control. I would just channel it in. It would come through and boom, it was there. I didn't have any control over it, So it wasn't like I was consciously saying, I'm going to play this note and this note works good with that one. No, it was like, this feels right and this feels right and that seems correct. And so this is the whole mystery and the magic of music. And you're right, it just does seem to be a little bit hollow these days, because it's been so programmed and so manipulated, and people are not even realizing why they're listening to music anymore. I mean, their attention spans are down to, minutes or even seconds. And I mean, everyone's now twitting and tweeting, and it's all just about, 50 characters or 200 characters, and that's it. And you do that like 200 times a day or 300 times a day, and that's your cultural expression, and that's kind of poor.
And I see.
So that's my take on this.
I see the same thing in movies and TV shows. Also, I see a lot of occult symbolism. I see a push towards some transhuman type ideas.
Yes.
AI.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention all that. I didn't even get into that whole thing about the AI, because that's it's like they're just conditioning us. It leads right into the next subject that you were talking about, television and stuff, right? It's like music is already conditioning. Like Lady Gaga's had some videos that were, it was all about, being connected to ETs and being like a hybrid race. And so they're starting to introduce these ideas of hybrid races, of ETs mixing with us. And then now they're bringing in this whole AI. There's this Poppy, you've probably seen. It's like she's like this airhead. They're playing it up that she's this total airhead, and people think that's cool. Like, wow, she's such an airhead, and it's like, that's cute. And so she's this airhead, and she's acting like a droid. She's already acting like a total mind control slave. I mean, if you read Kathy O'Brien's Transformation of America, you'd never watch Poppy videos with the same set of mind ever. There's this one video she has where she clinks around on this little mini keyboard or mini xylophone for 20 minutes. Like, I mean, you'd have to really be a zombie to want to watch that. And then millions of people, if you look at the count, right? I mean, I don't even know if those are real counts, but we all know who owns Google. I mean, who owns YouTube. So, but isn't it ironic that, 4 million people have watched this video where she's going ding, ding, ding. Like, I mean, I'd pull my hair out after 5 minutes of watching it.
I was not one of those 4 million, definitely.
But yeah, AI and transhumanism and all these things they're all being put out there in the music and the pop scene.
And what goes along with it is the poisoning of our food, water, and air. I believe they're doing that to supplement the dumbing down, the GMOs, whatever the hell they're spraying in the air. It's hard to find good food. Nobody's eating right. And it goes along with the dumbing down of society is what I'm seeing.
Well, yes. I mean, it's really noticeable to mainly those people who, like yourself, are awake. Once you've cracked open, then you look at society and television and everything out there in media as in a completely different way. I mean, I don't have a television. I don't even watch television anymore because the last time I watched it, I was only watching it to kind of study the media, because you kind of could see the patterns of where, I was doing research, and then I would watch television and I'd see directly the reflection of what was being talked about in this research, where society was being shaped and programmed and developed, appearing right there on television. And if people are not aware, if you're aware of it, you can't even tolerate it anymore. If you're standing at a checkout counter and you look over what's at the checkout counter, cheap magazines and junk food. And so you're sitting there and it's all impulse, right? So it's all feeding that superficial mindset in society. So you're looking over at the articles and you're seeing, it's funny, I can see, because I grew up and I lived in America many years, I can see the articles and the headlines in both countries across the Atlantic. Isn't it ironic, Chris, that you can have headlines going on in Time Magazine and Forbes and whatnot, and then you're standing at a checkout counter somewhere in Timbuktu, Germany, or Stuttgart or someplace. You're at the checkout counter and you look over at the magazine, and guess what? It's the exact same cover and the exact same message, even though we're like 12,000 miles apart or kilometers apart, and there's really no relationship between the two countries other than the one that's forced upon us by a globalist society.
Yes, and I think a big reason that they're pushing for this is that there is a sort of awakening happening right now. I've noticed it firsthand. I see a lot more people questioning what's going on around them, what's going on with so-called politics, which I think is just BS to begin with. But a lot of people are waking up to what's going on behind the scenes. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. There are people waking up. There's no doubt about that. And as you begin to wake up, you recognize more people that are waking up. And I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people waking up, but I think really if you look at it in a percentage basis, it's probably like not even 1% of the population waking up. But it doesn't necessarily matter, because it always has been only a very, very small portion of people, awakened and enlightened people, that have pushed advancement in society ever. So we don't need 99% to wake up. We just really need the 1% to wake up. And you realize there's a sleeping giant, because out of the 99% that are still sleeping or not awakened yet, a lot of them are halfway there. They're like waiting because they feel something is not right. They know that there's something up. I mean, that's kind of what started it for me. I always had this feeling that something doesn't add up here. Because if once you start realizing that this and this was a lie, and you've proven it for yourself, then you realize that how many other things out there are. And then you become restless, and you're hungry for something. You may not be willing to take the risk, because, as yourself, I'm sure you get a lot of flack too, and I do, and people I know do, because when you challenge these hardcore ideas of mainstream society, which is based on stability and not taking any risks, you confront a lot of anger and fear. So you have to realize that that part of it is not everyone's going to want to take that risk. Only some people are going to want to take that risk. But those people who are wanting to wake up, that are, let's say, sleeping, like the roots of the tree go deeper underground, you know, that part, that sleeping giant, they'll kick in, I think, at some point, once we've reached this critical mass. And we may be at that point. And a lot of people believe that the reason that there's this feverish attempt by this, you know, cabal or these evil, whatever you want to call them. I hate even using words like that because it's just stigmatized, you know, just people that are wrong thinkers or parasites. Let's just call them that. Why should we even call them the elite? I mean, the elite is reserved for, they're psychopathic parasites. You know, they can't help it. You know, they're like, you know, when you have a bacteria on your body, it's like, it's just, all it's doing is what's natural for itself. It needs to feed on something. And if you're stupid enough to feed it, well, then it survives. But the minute you begin to stop feeding it, it begins to die off. And I think maybe there's this moment right now in history where there's this desperation on behalf of the virus, you know, parasites that are out there. They know their days are numbered, and they know that people are waking up. So they're throwing everything they have at it, including all these things like 5G and AI. And I mean, you know, I mean, sometimes in my darker moments, I think, you know what, it's already over. It's like Elon Musk said, you know, when he was at an interview with Joe Rogan, it's like, he used to be the one everyone thought, oh, he's the cool entrepreneur, the millionaire, the billionaire that wants to go to Mars, and he's against AI, etc. And there he is on the show saying, you know what, while he's puffing on his joint, I think it's over already. All we can do is figure out a way to best adapt ourselves to what's already there. You know, when someone like he says that, it's kind of scary because you realize he's a lot more informed about it than you or I are, because simply on the course of on the basis of his financial muscle and the people he's working with. So, you know, the darker moments, you're thinking maybe it's already over, and on the other hand, you're thinking maybe we still have a chance. But for me, I think, and for anybody who's awake, and it doesn't really matter, because I've even tried to insert myself back in the matrix, like to get into that sort of you know, ideology. You know, to go back and be unconscious, but it just doesn't work. You know, you can't, you know, and I can't do anything else. But what I do is I have my eyes open. I work in the arts. I put out things, and those things have to be about what I'm interested in. That happens to be consciousness, and it happens to be, you know, busting the old paradigms that are blocking us from moving on, you know, because we're still stuck in this old generation of thought.
And you just said consciousness. That's another thing they're terrified of, is the powers of our consciousness. I mean, I believe if we unlocked some of the ancient mystery school knowledge that they hold, and we used it with the powers of our consciousness, we would have unlimited potential. And I think that's what they're really terrified of.
Sure, they're terrified, and I think they're also it seems to me that they're very much locked into body consciousness. I remember reading a quote by Ray Kurzweil saying that he basically takes 200 vitamins a day because he figures in the next 20 to 40 years they'll figure out how to make us immortal, because he wants to be an immortal man. And I mean, if anyone, you know, fits that path of creepiness, if you're watching him in his interviews, it would probably be him, at least in my opinion. I mean, maybe some people think he's a tech god, you know, I don't know. But hearing him say something like that, it just reaffirms the idea that they are very much material oriented, the materialist society. They want to figure out a way to extend their bodies indefinitely, and they're using AI and transplanting their brains, thinking that their brains are them, into an artificial carrier. But I'm sorry, I guess it doesn't work that way, because we are not physical beings at all. And I think that a lot of these people, the reason they do these rituals, like, you know, blood rituals, or they sacrifice, you know, other human beings for their own power of lust of power, that's proving to me that they believe they need to maintain their physical existence as long as possible. And, you know, I mean, you've probably heard of the whole cloning stuff that's going on. I mean, there's so much going on. It's just crazy. But what we're learning, and I mean, those people on the cutting edge of progressive consciousness ideas know very well that we are not limited to our finite bodies. Tanya Maidenford and I, she's the executive producer of Packing for Mars and Solar Revolution. A lot of the films that I've been working on, we've been working on a show in Germany called Timeless that's basically all about people that have had NDEs and are tapping into paranormal states of consciousness, either through trauma or something, where they had an accident, or they died on the hospital bed, or they had something. But in all the cases of the people that have come on the show and they're talking about is that they were part of that 18% of people that have NDEs that step out of their bodies and look back and go, oh my God, I'm still alive, and they look down and they see that their body's still there. It still looks like them, but it's a light body, more of an energized body. And in some cases, these people have had experiences where they've traveled, like Eben Alexander. You might know him. He's an American neuroscientist who had an NDE. He was in a coma for 7 days. He had meningitis. He should have died. His brain function, he should never have recovered. And in that whole time he was gone, he was experiencing all this stuff. And it's just showing us that there's absolute proof that we are not finite bodies, that we're actually consciousness. And consciousness only utilizes the physical dimension to maneuver into. It's like we rein our bodies into the physical so that our consciousness can express itself. But when it's all said and done, we go back to where we came from. And these people that are here on the planet that are pushing this sort of materialist agenda seem to be not checking that. Because if they checked it, they would realize that we are immortal beings. We don't need to create artificial carriers for any reason to carry our consciousness indefinitely so that we can be, in a way, I kind of feel sorry for them. Can you imagine what it would be like, Chris, if you figured out a way to take your brain and implant it in another body, and you got there and you realized, oh my God, I'm stuck in this body. I can't get out of this body ever again. And you realize how limited and finite it is compared to what a true human being is, or true spirit is, who's outside, who's living outside of that envelope, who's able to take off and put on a new sleeve over time, over eons of time, forward and backward. There is no time on a certain perspective of consciousness, as we're learning from all these people that we've had, for example, on the show. They're just proving it. There's one guy, his name is Hans Otto Koenig. This guy will blow your mind. I think he's like 70 something now, 75. He's been in the 70s. He was the first guy to ever make a direct contact through radio signals, like white noise, to people on the other side. And he developed it so far that by now, in 2019, he's had over 40,000 recordings, and not just audio. He's actually figured out a way, and this is the crazy part, he was told by his spiritual guide on the other side, who appeared to him in a dream, how to build the technology to create the interface between the people on the other side of the veil and us. So we showed like actual images of these people on the other side talking on picture and voice from the other side, and naming the people who they're talking to by name, not just some random thing, but actually knowing them, knowing the people they're with, and discussing with how they're going to work together to further strengthen this bridge between both sides. That's where we're really heading in consciousness. This bridge of death and physical stuff, we're actually going to surpass that. And while at the same time, we're forced to go up against these techno freaks who are interested in confining everything to the material realm and implanting ourselves into those things. And they're developing everything for it. Chips, there's people that are volunteering to put tattoos on their body and chips, implants and stuff so that they can manipulate their digital environment around them, like open their doors or answer the telephone. It's creepy and scary. And you got to feel kind of sorry for these people because they're not checking the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's fascinating at the same time, the world we're headed. But something that's very interesting to me, I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's kind of disinformation or a certain narrative that they're trying to push, but the disclosure movement has some encouraging things going on right now, with the Navy wanting to document these UFO sightings, coming out with these Pentagon-released files. What do you think? What are your thoughts on what's going on with the disclosure movement right now?
I'm, I'm, you know, I'm the kind of person that isn't really going to just jump in and say, oh, well, that means that we're going to be getting disclosure. Because I think I also am aware of other things like Project Bluebeam and fake history and fake reality and fake news are an important part to get a handle on in society. So we have to be careful that we don't get misled or intoxicated with the idea that something major is going to come along and free us all, because it could be a total manipulation to usher in some other controlling force. Because it's like, you got to realize that the people that have been forcing and pushing society and steering society, they're not dumb. They realize that we're waking up, and they realize that, and they've probably had think tanks on this for decades on how to best steer the process in their favor, so that rather than us getting control of new technology and asserting our sovereignty as beings, they're actually the ones that are going to bring in the new control grid. And it'll be the new, it'll be a more enlightened society for sure. I mean, they'll have to be bringing in new technologies, because eventually the dam will break and people will start getting it out there one way or the other, just like the internet cracked open a lot of communication. But I think at the same time, they're going to want to control the spin. Why wouldn't they want to control the spin? So we have to still be skeptical, and we have to still question what's going on. But at the same time, we have to welcome it, because it is pretty cool that starting in last December, this whole thing began happening, and they were, on mainstream news, they were talking about these pilots, and now the whole Nimitz thing, USS Nimitz thing, is coming out. I mean, they just published this 587-page document, and I'm seeing it now constantly. Just the other day, and people are sending me stuff all the time saying, check this out, this is happening. And yeah, it is happening. And hopefully it's a good thing. But at the same time, why trickle feed us? I think people are awakened enough now to know that if there was a press conference and the government came clean, that they wouldn't be shocked anymore of things like, oh, there's extraterrestrials and we've been in communication with them. I think what they're worried about is the anger, because they would find out that for 70 plus years, our governments have been aware of these technologies. They've been using those technologies against us, or hoarding them for themselves, or who knows what, off-planet, colonies and stuff, while we are, forced to go along for 70 years with this obsolete ancient technology, fight wars, the only reason we're fighting wars is because we still need petrochemicals. And the only reason we have a powerful banking cartel is because of the oil industry. I mean, if you decentralized all that and got rid of all the oil products and all of that, the cartel, they would have a panic, because there would be no longer any control whatsoever. And they don't want to lose that control. So that's probably why they're not going to disclose it en masse. But that's the only way it really should be done. I mean, I think if the government were bold and daring, it would say, you know what? Yes, we have done it, but here's the light at the end of the tunnel. We're working toward it. You have to understand, we can't go from where we are now in 2019 to this Star Trek society overnight. But we're going to disclose everything that's out there. First things we should take care of is the health of people. There's healing technologies out there, so people don't have to die of cancer anymore. There's technologies to desalinate water, so that people in African and poor countries can get access to a pure, clean source of water, which is one of their biggest problems, believe it or not, just simply feeding themselves and living in a pure, clean environment. They wouldn't have to have 12 or 15 kids because they're worried only 3 of them are going to survive, if they knew that their chances of survival just went up by 500%. I think it would change society very quickly within a decade. I mean, going back to what I was saying to you about what took place in Germany. In 4 years, they took a country which was on its knees, and they raised it up to a super high level of, and there's no reason to think the human spirit wouldn't rise to the occasion anywhere in the world. People have only been made dumb or kept stupid. And if they were opened up and given the tools of technology and given the knowledge of what's out there, they would make a change. They would do the responsible thing. Nobody wants war. Everyone wants peace. They just want to raise a family, have fun, and pursue their ideologies and their dreams. That's what everybody wants to do. And everything that's being put in place right now, technology-wise, seems to be limiting those things and not making them more accessible. I mean, there's more restrictions, there's more surveillance. I mean, we may have more data flowing at us, but guess what? That data is being completely monitored so that, like you said earlier, I have some old links in my research files, and I was clicking on some links, and guess what? They weren't coming up anymore. You know why? Because YouTube's taking them all down. And that's part of what you were talking about when you opened up tonight, the sanitization of the information and the control of the information, forcing us to have to go to the dark web and forcing us to have to, to go out there and get angry about it and become a confrontational force. Hopefully, there's a way to get anger and channel that anger into something positive and say, I'm not going to get angry and go throwing rocks at a building or bomb anything. I'm going to start sharing information and talking about it, producing films, writing books, or holding meetings and pushing our government to do. Government is supposed to be our servants, man. We pay them with our tax money. They're our servants. They're not our leaders. They're our servants, and they're public servants, and we have to hold them accountable to it, and we have to remind them of that every now and then. And it seems like very few people are doing that nowadays. Wouldn't you say?
Definitely, I would have to agree 100%. And you mentioned possible off-planet colonies and a Star Trek society. Now, you've done, in Packing for Mars, you've done some research and spoke with people about the possibility of our secret space program and activities that we are currently engaged in on Mars. What are your thoughts about, how deep that goes and those possibilities that we could actually be on the moon and on Mars right now?
Well, I think the evidence is there to support that we are. And not only just, for me, I started to look at Jose Escamilla's films because he was one of the first filmmakers to show that NASA was smudging the pictures on the moon. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why would they smudge anything on the moon? It's our right. Again, we paid for the missions to the moon. We should have, in fact, the whole world. It's our heritage as human beings. It's our right to know what is out there in the universe. And I think the same applies to Mars. You can find evidence of archaeological evidence that blows your mind. I mean, not just the anomalies that are being revealed daily, but John Brandenburg did an amazing analysis of the xenon 128 in the atmosphere, that it shows that there was atomic activity on the planet, which is similar to the atomic concentration that started to take place on planet Earth, starting at the time that the atomic bombs were set off in the atmosphere. And there's evidence from remote viewing that talks about societies that existed back in Mars over 1 million years ago. And there's lots of evidence that the moon that we know that's around our planet right now wasn't always the moon that was here before, and that is actually brought here. There's just lots of things like that and of course just the whistleblowers too. But I mean, there's whistleblowers that actually do talk about things which you can really you can measure, and you can see, you can gauge them on their authenticity by actual evidence. And that's the part that convinces me about it. When a whistleblower comes and says something, it's one thing, you have to take it into consideration. You can't just accept it as truth until you find something that supports it, or maybe another whistleblower that comes out. And you can kind of read, I think, the whistleblower's sincerity on their body language. You can read it from, and that's one of the reasons in Packing for Mars that the concept was to put the camera directly close to the persons, because you can kind of get, it's almost like a BS filter. You can kind of look right into the person's eyes and see, are these people resonating with me? Are they authentic? Because you can kind of see it in their eyes. You can read it in their body language. And these are all these factors. And I think that the Mars thing is just, there's just too much history there. There's like 369 words of the English language, which are relative to the red planet. There's legends that go back thousands of years that talk about interaction between societies and a city built by red men. And there's this cultural, deeply ingrained history on our planet, which isn't talked about very much. it's the kind of stuff, the reason we find it is because we work with people like Klaus Donna, who's an out-of-place artifacts researcher. And, the Klaus Donna Chronicles is another film that we did where you can kind of go into some of these artifacts and realize, oh my God, there's stuff out there that we're not being told about, and it's real. It's not just a theory or someone coming out on a network and talking for 200 hours about a story. It's actually real stuff. You can get your hands on it, you can look at it, you can analyze it, and it's real. And it shows that there's something going on, that was something going on our planet, which goes way, way further back than our history books are willing to admit officially at this moment. And Mars is a big part of that. So I think the connection between Earth and Mars has always been there. I think the moon may or may not be a carrier of the civilization, either from Mars or from some other distant planet, maybe a remnant of civilization. There's evidence about it in the remote viewing documents that were released by the CIA in the 80s. It shows they were already doing remote viewing to the planet to figure out what was going on. And so this thing, for me, I mean, it's kind of obvious, and in the film we lay out some of the more defining evidences, like the Phobos things, of course, like the stuff that was leaked out in relation to the Mona Lisa and the Apollo 20 and those Red Sun missions. There's a lot of the footage in there that you can try and debunk it, but there are just too many odd things in it that don't make sense, that wouldn't be there if it was just a fake. And it's almost like it's a footprint. Like Lucas Gantamburlo, who's in our film, he calls it kind of like the breadcrumbs that were left in the documents because the astronauts couldn't reveal what they really saw, but they didn't want to go to their grave. Everyone wants to tell what they've seen. So the only way to do it is to release the documents with contaminated bits in it. So those who are doubting, they'll see the contamination as proof that it's fake, and those who are able to read between the lines will read the contamination as a special little signature left by the characters and the main characters involved in that whole part.
Yes, very interesting. And all that being said, do you think our future is headed towards a nonstop dystopian future where, we're going to have constant surveillance, 5G is going to be in full effect, and we're just going to be complete AI transhuman zombies? Or do we have a chance to fight back against this somehow? What could we do as individuals to possibly combat any of this?
I mean, the only thing that I think we can do is to begin our own research, is to start kind of like people who are skeptics of conspiracy theories, instead of just dismissing them, maybe take a look at one of them and do your own research. Because really, you need to do your own research to find if it's true or not. You can't just take it verbatim because the authorities tell you it's a conspiracy theory. Incidentally, the word conspiracy theory itself was a word invented by the CIA in the 70s. What a great way to kind of debunk everybody and write them off categorically, instantaneously. Oh, he's a conspiracy theorist. Well, guess what? There's a theory of evolution, and everyone's believing that Darwin's theory of evolution is real. Well, that's just a theory. So why would a conspiracy theory be any less valid? It just means that there's conspiracy. Conspiracy is when a group of people get together and they plot something. Conspiracies are real. I mean, there's a conspiracy to create the United States of America. There was a conspiracy to draft the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Those were all conspiracies, by the way, right? So a conspiracy is not a negative thing. A conspiracy theory is an enticement for somebody to open their minds, take a walk on the wild side, and begin to do a little research. And maybe, join, some other groups out there, begin reading some books, or, reading actually books, not just tweets or whatever, or following your Facebook feed, because those things are all, Facebook is completely controlled by the CIA. I mean, the funding sources of all these platforms, it always amazes me how people get upset when they've been blocked on Facebook or booted off YouTube. Well, excuse me, you're using the enemy's platform, so don't be surprised. I mean, it should be an honor to you if you get booted off Facebook or YouTube, because it shows them, or it shows yourself, it's almost evidence that you're on the right track. And there's plenty of alternative platforms out there for you to network with anyway. And so, I mean, this is the only way. I think if people don't do that, Chris, I don't know. I mean, if I want to be a cynic, I'd say it's like I said earlier, it's almost too late. They have so much money, they have so much power, so much control, and they've achieved their manipulation, their mind control to such a deep level that it's just like, again, that movie, The Matrix, when Neo first cracks out and he's being initiated into the Matrix, and he's told, Morpheus tells him all these people are potential, all these people that he's walking around in they're potential to wake up, but they're also, until they wake up, they're the enemy. And so there's a lot of people out there that are antagonistic toward others that are out there to wake up. So, I mean, geez, I don't know. I want to believe it. I want to believe that we're not destined to go that route. And I do believe that the human spirit is like vastly more powerful than people realize. I think we have these amazing abilities, and we just, we're just not being taught or told that these things are normal. I mean, that Ted Owens case that you had in America is a perfect example of a guy who had those abilities, and he didn't have to be an enlightened master to have control over the ability to shoot lightning in a certain place, or turn a tornado around and steer it someplace, with his abilities. It's almost like it's these inherent abilities are lying there sleeping for us to wake up, but we need to realize it. And if we don't realize it, then, because those are the things that we have that can counter anything that's thrown at us, like AI or 5G and all these things. Like 5G is only just the frequency. In a way, we aren't, we can be above that frequency. We can learn to tune our mind and our consciousness to frequencies that are not affected by that. But are we going to do it? I mean, if you walk down the street, the average person's, and listen to what the average person's talking about, you kind of realize that, okay, these people are not there. They're probably not going to be the ones that are going to manage to surpass 5G. And it's scary if you look at those Georgia Guidestones, the numbers that they've published out there. Again, secrets hidden right in the open. That, this is kind of, somebody seems to be moving us toward calling it down to those numbers. And so, I mean, that's the worst case scenario. So I think we have this opportunity, and maybe we have to be pushed all the way to the wall until we're squished right up against it. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm backed into a corner, I mean, I tend to be pretty easygoing, and I'll let myself, I'll tolerate a lot of abuse. But if someone pushes me really hard up against the wall, the warrior will come out. And it's amazing the abilities that I have in me, and I'm sure every other human being out there who's pushed to the wall has access to their own kind of abilities that would make them, push back. So maybe we need to come up. Maybe this whole thing that's going on around us right now, Chris, is just a test. It's like we set ourselves up for this. We humans said, okay, let's go down there. Let's make this thing work. Let's push the whole agenda. Let's get the 5G. Let's just keep pushing, because we need to make that leap. And Solar Revolution, that film we did with Dieter Burrs, it's not about solar panels. It's about the solar energy that's coming at us. And there's scientific evidence to support how that is activating our pineal glands to tap into production of things like natural dimethyltryptamine, which opens us up to perceiving other dimensions and other capabilities. So we have those abilities, and maybe all these things collectively, maybe we said collectively, let's just make this thing happen. Let's make it as bad as we can, because we need to make this jump. We need to make this evolutionary jump, and that evolutionary jump has happened periodically in society for you could say millions of years, but certainly documented for hundreds of thousands of years. There's cycles, and these cycles are connected with the galaxies and the sun. The Mayans knew about it. They were just describing one cycle. When 2012 came and went, everyone thought, oh, nothing changed. Well, it doesn't have to change. It was just part of the cycle. And it's ushered in this new cycle, and maybe this is going to happen. Maybe we really do have to push to the wall, and maybe that's the chance that we have to crack out of it.
Very well said. Yeah, that was awesome. And I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to come on tonight. And just go ahead and tell us if you have anything interesting coming up that you'd like to talk about.
Well, we are currently, like I said, we've been developed. We spent the last 4 months producing 26 one-hour episodes of this timeless show in German. It's pretty much sapped our complete energy because you can imagine the production schedule of 26 shows over 3 months. But that's wrapping up, and that's now up on Gaia. It's all in German though, so it's the first foray that Gaia has made into German territory, and it's completely unique in that way because it's a very exciting show, totally unlike anything produced in America. And we're actually the first outsourced production company to produce a show for Gaia outside of their studios. So I think we have something very special there because it really is unique, and it's really showing you bona fide stuff that humans are capable of doing, bringing in the leading scientists in Germany or even internationally, people like Eben Alexander or Pim van Lommel, people like that that are coming in, and they're laying down the documentation about the paranormal universe and the super consciousness that's out there. So that's something that we've been working on, and we still have our films out there for people to watch. Like you can get to them on our websites, like Packing for Mars. You can go to the website packingformarsmovie.com. The Klaus Donna Chronicles, for people that are interested in learning about those forbidden artifacts, would be the klausdonnachronicles.com. Maybe you can post them on your thing later. And Solar Revolution is another movie that really will open a lot of people's minds. It's one of those movies that you can show the most diehard skeptics. In fact, we still get letters from people that are like the black sheep in their family, and they get them to sit, and they take this movie and they make their skeptical family members or friends sit there and watch it. And it's really hard to shoot down because it really is serious science and showing what's going on. So that would be solarrevolutionmovie.com, and that one would open up, I think, a lot of new avenues for people. Other than that, we're working on kind of a few sort of secret projects. There's probably going to be a book that we'll be working on in the next few months, and I'll let you know. So maybe when we have that ready, or we've got that closer to release date or finished, we can do another show and we can get into some of that stuff. We might dig in a little bit deeper into the secret space program, maybe fill out a lot of the stuff that we didn't talk about in Packing for Mars with some new evidence or some additional evidence, or some of the stuff that we've been learning about over here in Germany, which is very exciting. Because it's something that nobody in the English-speaking world really has access to. So we feel really blessed that we're living right there where we're tapping into source material, and it is really amazing. And it sort of contradicts in a lot of ways, or it makes you reevaluate and set a new view of where it's going into your mind with all this secret space information out there. It's all just about getting the truth out. We're not we have no agenda. We have no sponsors. We're free to express our ideas uncensored. So whatever we're going to release film-wise or book-wise is going to be, the real deal in terms of what we found. And we don't have any, CIA sponsors behind us. We don't have any money givers that say, "Oh, you got to take that part out because that could be damaging." Our only censorship is our sensitivity to, to certain idealisms in our films and the moral code that we want to uphold. But we're really about getting the truth out there, and it'll continue to be that way, unless 5G rots our brains out in the next 6 months.
Very good. I want to thank you so much again. That was an awesome conversation. And yeah, I'm going to definitely have to have you back on.
That would be great. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Really nice.
Yes, same here. You have a good day.